Quick little intro before I begin to break the game down. The core format of the review is based on 4 criteria: graphic fidelity, game mechanics, audio, and replayability. Each of these categories has its own weight and will be measured up at the end of the video.
Ready?
I am.
Bad luck. Oh.
Ready?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go. 2018.
10 out of 10. No.
Let's begin by talking about the easiest part to judge, the graphic fidelity. I don't really need to say much other than it perfectly captures the aesthetic they're aiming for, and that's quite simply a stylized colour palette on top of a tropical/Caribbean stage with prospects of the pirate life between the 17th century. The character design is overly exaggerated with intentions of creating individuality and a sense of age to these characters and the models and textures within the game. You can see this purely by loading up the game and starting everything as its distinguished identity, and seems to never fall short no matter where you go in the accessible areas. Looking at the NPCs idling around the world to the very floorboards you walk across to get to your ship for the first time, it's all polished to the highest of quality. I'm not even going to mention the seas, you can just look at it yourself and be amazed. Now each ship is created with its own originality that follows the format of the actual blueprints of the ships that they're modelled after, that being the sloop, the brigantine, and the galleon. Each of these ships has its own depth to portray the withered age of the ships, to demonstrate that they were lived, worked, and built before you, the player, became the sailor of the ship you're currently sailing. This design choice really captivates with the rest of the world and highlights the developers' attentions to detail when it comes to quote-unquote immersing the player within the game with their method of world building. I could talk for hours and hours about how the game is so beautifully presented regardless of changing the quality settings. No matter where you are or what you're doing, regardless of situation, you can always find a beautiful spot within the game. Fuck. The audio, I don't really need to say much about it, but the little things that I can say, however, is that whenever you're playing the instruments, or just standing around, just idling on the beach, or inside the little towns, everything just sounds like it belongs. There's not a single sound within the game that feels off, or isn't meant to be there, or just feels like it just doesn't really capture the essence of where you are. Ranging from the skeleton forts, to the open seas, to swimming in the waters, to being attacked by monsters and mobs and, you know, the kraken and all that noise. Everything just feels like it belongs within the game itself.
Spoiled fish. No, standard one. Okay. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed that, mate.
I did. Very much.
Yeah, go Snake Island.
Alright. Now, speaking for itself, the sea's physics is by far, by far, the most impressive object in the game. And if you don't know that, you need to really just look at it and pay attention, because it's something that is very, very difficult to do. But we'll just leave that to the side for now. Based on how it's, you know, it looks, it works and reacts, it's borderline flawless. It's very clear they have dedicated a lot of hours into developing the physics, and within good reason. Majority of the time players are interacting with the sea, so naturally it would, quote unquote, naturally be the most developed piece of the physics in the engine. However, I do have issues with it though. Firstly, the cannons of the ship in high seas during battles can be a real pain to control. I don't mean firing, and missing. What I mean is that the cannons seem to have a sort of strafed shot when you're moving in a certain position. I think the video better explains what I'm talking about, and I don't really get how this mechanic works. But personally, I would love to be wrong about this, simply because of the systems in place are pretty damn accurate to their real life counterparts. The sails, for example, positioning them depending on wind strengths whilst taking into account the location of the hull is damn genius, and without proper knowledge of these tips and tricks can easily separate good players from the bad players. And for that reason, I'd rather not put the extra couple of hours into researching the cannonball schematics being used, since this could very well be just one of those quirks they've added with pure intention of mimicking the real life cannons that are used. Or not, it could be a natural point, but I'm not going to put that much effort into researching it. It's a quirky thing. What are the spawn triggers between the Kraken, the Megalodon, and the skeleton ships? I don't want to say it, but it seems like there isn't any form of algorithm to stop them from overlapping the three with one another, because it does happen, and it really shouldn't. Granted, players are capable of defeating multiple spawns thanks to the ship management and all that, but personally it doesn't come across as a positive quote-unquote feature of the game. I am aware the Kraken only spawns when all other active events are on cooldown, so don't give me that shit. I understand the reasoning behind why they're in the first place. The workload put into them isn't anything to scoff at, and I agree they serve purpose in the open world, but rare, please, not all at once. And finally, content. I can appreciate a large portion of it. It's very player driven, ranging from ship battles to public groups and strongholds. In the space of a year, they have added 6 content updates. Not DLC, to be clear, actual content updates. A content update is a very mandatory part of a game's infrastructure where you cannot continue to play the game unless you update it. DLC, on the other hand, is completely optional. So, you got to bear in mind that they are keeping this game updated. It is not something to think it's, you can't just shrug it off. It is a good thing.
Aim for the ground.
I'm gonna make sure they're loud. The voice is very loud.
Oh, where, my friend? We come with parting gifts.
Just leave. And that leads on to our next segue of replayability. And everything that I've just mentioned about the content updates, it's all fine and dandy, but, Jesus Christ, does it get mundane quick. Let me give you a quick rundown on why. You get the quest, objective to get something from somewhere, you find it on the island, you return it, and that's it. That's it for all 3 main commendations. I really don't know how to justify that. I mean, you could have literally implemented mission spawns in the sea to fight the magical rainbow boys, that being the Megalodons, to receive commendation, or even add special crates to the skull forts. The mechanic is already there, and you're not using it. Only the person/group who has the quest can trigger the spawns of the crates, right, and/or skeletons. So why isn't it added to the 3 actual world bosses that freely roam around, or even the skull ships as well? Why aren't they being used for the Voyage quest lines? It's at least, it could increase the difficulty of the settings to help people progress in a more interactive way to the 50-50-50 pirate legend. You could argue it'd make it harder to do with enemy players interrupting, but isn't it the same concept anyway? I'm not going to lie to you about it. I've had my fair share of arseholes destroying and stealing my loot, as have I done to other players. It is the pirate's life, which is the motto of the fucking game. It sounds hypocritical of me to complain about world bosses being too perpendicular and all that on a singular ship, regardless of what you're doing, or how skilled, or how many players there are on the ship. I know, I see it, I get it. I did complain about it earlier on in the video, but at least grasp of where I'm coming from with this. The journey to Pirate Legend is dull. It is linear, and it is heavily reliant on players engaging with one another, and even then, you don't get much out of it, so players don't even bother doing that in the first place. Players just tend to do it for the sake of just assaulting other players for the fun of it. It is a boring game when you take out the PvP aspect, and it is in serious need of rework. I've been through it all. I've leveled since day one of release, and in between patches. It hasn't changed. I am Pirate Legend, by the way. Just to point that out, I have made that climb. It isn't fun. Now, I don't want to give recommendations, since having others mess around with your project can turn a camel into a horse. That being, many hands onto one single project, it won't come out as your idea. But just hear me out though. Just maybe have 3 levels of difficulty that increase the amount you're going for in large strides of distance across the map. Like from Golden Sands to the Wildlands, that largely affect a group of, kind of like an aggro system, to increase the chances of spawn rates on the host's ship and affiliated ships through clans in particular. At least then carrying large amounts of chests have a risk factor in place by recording the amount of chests found / withheld on the ship by the clan, or the player holding the voyage to correspond with the quest difficulty you've chosen. Completing the difficulty would reward you based on a possibility of a number of things, like speed, how long it took you to do it, the amount of chests you've been tasked to collect, and then the amount of chests that you've got. So you got to do 10 out of 10. If you come back with 9, you might get a multiplier on how much you've actually brought back based on percentage of completion. Or, the damage done to the ship. If you absolutely knacker your ship during that transition between you starting the voyage and completing the voyage, if it's completely totaled or you've had to repair it God knows how many times, that could be classed as a form of a penalty of sorts. I believe that might help out with trying to avoid situations or trying to engage more in situations. Just allowing that interaction between PvP being more of a reason other than just, BMing other players. It makes a little bit more sense to me. Also, I'm surprised that this isn't in yet, to be honest. I get why it's not in it, but I feel like it's an interesting mechanic that should be in. Personally, again, I don't want to change anything. I'm just trying to put suggestions out there. You don't have to do it. It's just a video. You ain't gonna fucking worry about it. Anyway, I'm surprised that having been taxed for knackering your ship isn't in. Like, for example, it would give reason to spend the gold that you accumulate over the amount of game time you have. Personally, I think I have about 800,000 gold pieces and I have nothing to spend it on. However, with this in place, it would, give me a reason to spend on repairing my ship for good when I come back to an outpost. So say, for example, I go out on a voyage and a Kraken spawns, absolutely destroys my ship, and I've repaired it up with planks of wood. As I'm coming back to an outpost, I may not be as fast as I once was. I may constantly take on water, but as a very slower rate. My sails might not be as efficient because they're ripped and torn. And then as I get to the outpost, I can choose to purchase new layers of linen for the sails, or actually refurbish the entire hull to be able to put my movement speed back up to 100% rather than being, have my ship knackered and being put down to 50%, if that makes sense. It would really give more of a reason to interact with the ship harbour, really. It would allow more of a reason to spend your gold, and it would actually, I feel like it would help with the immersion, if that makes sense. It would give a reason why you're there, trying to complete these commendations, trying to earn gold. Maintenance and tax is something it helps with the grind element, I believe, but in an actual interactive way, personally, I believe. But I see that Sea of Thieves is more or less based on the fun concept and not really trying to put more hidden mechanics inside the game to bottleneck the player-driven concept. Now, Sea of Thieves as a whole is a very well structured enjoyable and satisfying experience. To accomplish your first Megalodon kill, whether through the Hungering Deep quest, when you were there at the time, or as they just, not freely just knock around the world, it is an enjoyable feat, and it never really truly leaves. You always feel a little bit of satisfaction taking down that big thing. Same as with the Kraken, same as with the skeleton ships. You always get that hit of dopamine, it is an enjoyable experience. And graphically, it is unbelievably stunning. From, the lowest form of graphics to the highest settings, it does all around. It is a very, very beautiful style, very beautiful game. Cannot go wrong. And to top that comment off, the audio really complements what you're seeing. The game as you see it is amazing. Just by loading it up and looking at it from from your screen perspective and not doing anything else, it looks phenomenal. However, beyond that though, I'm afraid the content or lack thereof really holds it back, and I do hope they begin to flesh out the things to do aspect, because honestly, if I have to see another goddamn explodey boy running at me at Mach fucking 1 just to get a chest of sorrows out of that goddamn skeleton fort, I don't know.
I want someone to take the double points if you hit it in the fucking eye. So good! I didn't do damage to it and I charged right into its face. Reported for cheating. Dan, come back.
Hacks.
Dan, I'm lonely.
I've got the flag up, so we shouldn't move too much.
I'm making progress. I hear him. I actually do hear him. Oh, there he is. Fuck off, mate.
Oh, of course we're in range of fucking skellies.
I'm almost back.
Now, this review was made months ago, and I have been on and off with it quite a while, hence the month ago, I guess. And I'd never really got round to completing it, so there has been quite a lot of updates within the game. I've been keeping up to scratch with them. I have, been doing the storylines, I've done the Telltale Tall Tales, I've done the anniversary update, and I haven't done the latest one with the fire bombs and the fire explosions and the fire heart stuff. I have seen I have seen him be released. I just haven't seen the newest stuff. And I think it's worth mentioning this, that the updates themselves have really proven my conclusion wrong, I must say. So this is a new conclusion in a sense. The content is actually pretty enjoyable. The actual PvE concept of it, the solo bull, anniversary update, the Shroud Breaker stuff, it really is an enjoyable experience. Doing the whole storyline is fantastic. It is amazing. They've done a really good job with the puzzles and interactive. The storyline of it is gripping. However, and again, looking beyond that though, having to repeat it 5 fucking times just to unlock a different sail skin or a different hull skin or a different whatever skin that's related to the stuff or related to the actual storylines, Telltales, whatever they are. It's not a good way of doing it, but it does have the grind element, I suppose. I don't think it's worth the effort of repeating the same storyline over and over and over again just to get a skin that doesn't even look that great in the first place. Yeah, shots fired. So the overall point scoring of it is, I would say, 8.5 out of 10, and that was revisited with the story updates up until now. They still haven't fixed the lingering issues that I mentioned, about the whole storyline thing, the interactions with the world bosses, as you want to call them, as well as, fixing the explosion radiuses, fixing the fucking, the aimbot skeletons. They're still there, and they still got a problem, and they haven't been addressed. But yeah, it is a solid game to play. It is worth the monthly Game Pass. It is worth the actual price of the game. Maybe at a discount, like 20% off maybe. And when it does release on Steam, I am tempted to probably buy it on Steam as well. We'll see. I don't know how to end this. Fuck it. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment how much you fucking hate it, what I've just said. And I bid you adieu.